Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof,
This is
Jerusalem.
part 2 of the shiurim, the art scroll, 75A2, and this is dedicated to the elevation of the soul of my father-in-law, Rabbi Pinchas Chai ben Malka. And he struggled very hard to make sure that all of his 11 children would be dedicated to Judaism and Torah, and the sons are Avrahim, and they learn, and they're just very beautiful people who are very connected to full-time learning, and hopefully we can be inspired by that and do the same for our children. So the Mishnah was set up with these 4 categories of what happens when you're mixing things up. And in the Trumos, we're used to dealing with these puzzles of what happens when you're mixing up Truma with Chulin. But this is the source here for what happens when you mix up other categories of things, like when you're getting your Maaser Rishon mixed up with your Chulin or something like that in these 2 baskets. So the Mishnah ruled in this third case that if you have 100 figs of Maaser and it became mixed with 100 figs of rectified Chulin, you have to separate out 110 figs from that mixture. So there's a total of 200 figs, and you're losing in this in order to get it right, to make sure that there's no problem in here. You have to take out 110 figs. It's a big loss. And 10 figs of that is going to be designated as Trumos Maaser. That goes to the cone. And you say, well, why are you losing 110 figs? And you're trying to make sure that definitely you're not stuck with the Truma Maaser area in there. And then you have 100 that are going to be Chulin. And all 110 have to be sold to the cone for a price of 100. That's what the Mishnah says. Why is it that it's sold for the price of 100? Well, you can't sell them the 10 because that's Trumas Maaser that already belongs to them. You can't sell them something that's already theirs. So you're really taking a big loss on that. But the Gemara is going to have a dissent from what that Mishnah says, of course. And Rabbi Mana says that the sages of our Mishnah dispute Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And I want to remind you that the full name of Rabbi Meir is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And why were they calling him Rabbi Meir? Because he illuminated so many laws. So interesting that Rabbi Mana uses the full name of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara says it was taught in the Brisa, if Maaser Rishon, that is Tevel, with regard to Trumas Maaser, mixed with Chulin, that is fully rectified, the rule is as follows. And this Brisa reads, it says, if he has support from elsewhere, in other words, he has some other unrectified Maaser Rishon that can be used as the Truma Maaser on behalf of the Maaser Rishon in the mixture, the Gemara says that he separates the Truma Maaser from it according to the amount needed to rectify the Maaser Rishon in the mixture. The Gemara continues, says, but if he does not have unrectified Maaser Rishon from somewhere else to use his Truma Maaser for the Maaser Rishon in the mixture, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, which is Rabbi Meir, says he should designate the Trumas Maaser in it from within the Maaser in the mixture itself, and let the Trumas Maaser become nullified in this mixture in 1 in 100. Now, everybody agrees that the easiest thing to do is to go find a third pile and use this third pile to go rectify this messed up pile that you're dealing with now. But the problem is, and why are they giving this math? Well, maybe you can't find a third pile. And anyway, the reason the sages are giving this at the end of Demai is to teach you how to do it just so that you know how to do it. Even if you had a third pile, you could look at the law and say, I know the law, I understand the law didn't get lost on how to handle it. And the idea here, says the Marafulda about this, is that, as an example, if you have 100 measures of Maaser Rishon that falls into the Chulin, he has to separate 11 and 1/9 measures from this other source as Trumas Maaser. And that's going to be to rectify this 100 measures that are in the mixture. This, by the way, is how you're going to do it per 100 when you're separating from without. What is from within or from without? from without is when you're adding in another another set of units from outside of this basket. So you have 100 within, 11 fell into it. How many do you need to add in order to get out that 11 and 9th measures? You have to add in 11 and 9th measures. So that's going to be where you're fixing that. And the Truma Maaser, like Truma, becomes nullified by Hulin in a ratio of 101. So that if there's 100 parts of Hulin in the mixture for every 1 part of Truma, the Truma gets nullified in that mixture. But Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is teaching that if you can't find other Maaser Tevel to fix this mixture, he's not obligated to leave the mixture unrectified and to leave it forbidden to him. Rather, if there is enough Hulin in the mixture to nullify the Truma Maaser, he may designate the Truma Maaser within the mixture itself and let it take effect and become nullified. And that is how he's going to permit the entire mixture to a non-Kohen. This, by the way, is the opinion of Rabbi Meir on how to fix it. But the question is that, how do you do that where everybody's going to agree? For instance, the Ramah is pointing out that when Truma becomes nullified in a mixture, only its prohibitions become nullified, and its monetary status is going to be the property of the Kohen that's going to remain in place. And for this reason, whenever Truma becomes nullified, one is supposed to remove an equivalent amount and give it to the Kohen in compensation for the Truma that was lost through the nullification. And consequently, when one follows the procedure and removes a piece to give it to a Kohen, that piece is going to be, the Rabbanan, viewed as the Truma piece that was lost. And therefore, once it's removed from the mixture, there's nothing left to awaken it when that Truma falls in. And so that's going to be how they're going to handle it. So accordingly, in the third set of this Mishnah, where the Maaser Rishon becomes mixed with the Hulin, it should not be necessary to separate out 110 figs to rectify this Maaser. And then they're going to have to sell it to a Kohen. And that's really what happens, right? We have to go back to this way to, how do we fix it? We got to go back to selling it to a Kohen, except it ends up being at a very, very big loss. So don't mix this stuff up. By the way, even if you went and you bought Hevel from another case and you came back and you were having to fix it from this other pile, guess what? That's still going to be very expensive as well. So accordingly, in this third case of the Mishnah, where the Maaser Rishon becomes mixed with the Hulin, it should not be necessary to separate out 110 figs to fix this Maaser. And then, by the way, you're going to have to sell it to a Kohen. So what are they dealing with? They're talking about one should be allowed to designate out just 10 figs, and one after the other is Truma Maaser, and thereby allow each one to become nullified in turn of the 100 figs and Hulin in their mixture. In other words, what they're saying is, why don't they just take out 1 fig at a time? You know there's 10 in there, and you take out 1 at a time until the whole thing becomes nullified. And since the sages of the Mishnah do not present this as an option, basically it means that they don't agree that that's possible, and they don't agree with Rabbi Meir's opinion. So there's another Amarah who's going to reconcile this Mishnah in the view of Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Ba Bar Marmel says, interpret our Mishnah as referring to items that do not become nullified. For example, walnuts of Perach and other specific items that are significant in the halacha. And this kind of item can't be nullified. The only way to do it is to rectify the Maaser that comes mixed in with it. And we know that, like in Masechet Orlah, you have certain cases with these pomegranates of Badin, or beet leaves, or sealed casks, or nuts, the Perach nuts. And basically, it's saying that if you have something that's very unique and very specific, that you can keep it so that it's very, very specific in the halacha, and it doesn't get nullified because it's specific. So one of the examples Rabbi Akiva gives is in the case of a woman who bakes her own challah. So if that falls into other bread, that doesn't become nullified in a large mixture. Why? Because it's very specific. So Rabbi Babar Marmel is saying that perhaps Rabbi Meir is talking about a case where you're talking about something that's very specific that doesn't become nullified, and that's how he's going to answer it. So the question that Rabbi Hillel Bar Pazi asks in this Gemara says, but let him crack open the walnuts and negate the significance and make it allowed to be subject to nullification. So the Gemara is going to answer that. And Rabbi Yonah says that is one initially allowed to crack open the walnuts in order to nullify them? And this, by the way, comes up in a Mishnah in Orlah 3:6. And it says over there, it says this Gemara, if the walnuts were cracked open in the past tense, and surely that means to imply that if somebody already cracked them open before they piled into this mixture, they're going to be nullified after the fact. But what this is pointing out, says Rabbi Yonah, to now go crack them open in the first place in order to nullify them, that's not allowed. And so what this is trying to say is it's trying to say, look, you have a problem here. And I understand that you don't want to lose a lot of money and sell it to a Cohen. But what you can't do is go one at a time, crack them open, and nullify them. And what Rabbi Yonah is pointing out, that the Mishnah in Orlah in 3:6 is saying, look, if you went and did it, and it happened where it was cracked beforehand, and then they fell into the mixture, okay, you could say it's nullified. But what you can't do is take this special unit that perhaps Rabbi Meir is talking about, and now say, okay, this is going to be nullified because I'm going to do it with a game where I'm going to play it one at a time. So the Mishnah stated, if 100 figs of tevel mixed with 90 figs of Maaser Rishon, whose Trumas Maaser has not yet been removed, this is the rule. Basically what it's saying, as long as the tevel is going to be more than the Maaser Rishon. What it's saying, he doesn't lose anything. And when it's saying he doesn't lose anything, basically it's saying that he's going to get the most out of this that he can get, which, by the way, is not that great. Because, again, he has to sell it at a loss. But that's the best he can do. That's really what it's saying when it says that he doesn't lose anything. So the Mishnah, what this is going to be getting at, is the Mishnah is dealing with a case of tevel that becomes mixed with chulin or Maaser. And accordingly, the tevel is going to be referring to the produce that was not tithed at all. And then the tevel discussed in this Mishnah is going to have a different definition. Again, we know that there's two ties that have to come out of something to make sure something is not tevel. You have the Truma Gedola, and then you have the Trumas Maaser. Both have to be removed to make sure this is not tevel. So the Gemara explains how it was, and it says, Rav Livinti said in the name of Rabbi Yonah, all the tevel that we're dealing with here in this Mishnah is tevel only with regard to the Maaser Rishon and the Maaser Sheni, and it's not with regard to the Truma Gedola, because the Truma Gedola is already separated from it. In other words, what this is saying is that second tithe that has to be taken out, the Truma Gedola, that's still in there. But the Truma Gedola, which is going to be the thing that we're normally used to dealing with to make sure something is not tevel, that's still going to be taken out. And the Truma Gedola is still going to be in there. So in doing the tithes, you have to remember that there's two tithes to make sure that something is not tevel. Anyway, this Mishnah is teaching that where you have tevel that exceeds the Maaser by a tenth, the owner does not lose anything. This now is talking about the case of this general formula that's given to you that's after these four cases. These four cases are dealing with what happens if you have, you have chulin that's already had everything separated, and now you have Maaser Rishon that falls into it, things like that. So what happens with this formula? What are we talking about with this case? And the Gemara is talking about these instances where you have a way for the owner to avoid losing anything. And the Gemara is going to be talking about a case where you have 100 figs of tevel falling into 100 figs of chulin, and you have this mixture. Now we know that they don't nullify each other. What do you do with it? And again, when it's talking about you don't lose anything, it's using a best case scenario so that you can get the most use out of the figs, and you can also sell it to the Kohen for the least amount of loss. Rabbi Abahu says in this Gemara there is a dispute between Rebbe and Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, regarding an owner's option in the case of a mixture of tevel and chulin. This, by the way, is the Mishnah's first case, the first out of the 4 cases. And the Gemara says, one of them said if he wishes to avoid having to separate 101 and selling it to a Kohen, he may make the tevel in the mixture Maaser Sheni for another place. In other words, you go and you find another pile and you buy the other pile and then or acquire it. Maybe you grew it even. And then what you do is you're going to tithe to try to fix this mixture that all got bungled up, where you have 100 that's going to be tevel and 100 that's going to be chulin. You have this mix of 200 figs that is this mixture that is very problematic to try to fix. Easiest thing to do, go get another pile and then fix it with a third pile, fixing the first and second pile. That's the easiest. So the Gemara says that, one of them said if he wishes to avoid having to separate 101 and selling it to a Kohen at a loss, he may take the tevel in the mixture of Maaser Sheni from another place and for other fruit, and thereby rectify the fruits of the Maaser Sheni obligation, and he may redeem the Maaser Sheni and use the entire mixture for himself. That, by the way, is the best case, because again, we saw that when you have to take out 101 figs in this kind of case, which is the first case in the Mishnah, we're not just taking out 101 figs and being able to use the 99. That's the best case, is using the 99. But that 101 figs, you're even selling at a loss. You have to sell it at the devalued price of the truma. And the Gemara says, and the other one said, he can indeed make all of it Maaser Sheni for another place, but he must still separate the Maaser Rishon on its behalf from another place. And according to this Tana, he's basically saying that you're allowed to designate the ties of the Demai out of order in this case. And again, this is just Demai, and these earlier obligations are not canceled as a result. And what this Tana says, according to Rabbi Kanievsky, is that if one designates all of the Demai in a mixture to be Maaser Sheni for other fruit, he must go and designate the Maaser Rishon and the Trumas Maaser for the Maaser Sheni from another source. Again, you got to go find another source to try to fix this. And again, this is trying to fix how to do it in the best case way, where you're not taking out most of the figs from this 200 fig pile and then selling that at a discount and only getting to use a very small number of these figs. So this Mishnah is dealing a case where tevel and Maaser become mixed together in equal amounts with a majority of tevel. And the Gemara is trying to figure out what to do in a case where the mixture contains a majority of the Maaser. And the Gemara formulates the question by quoting a brisa that deals with these cases. And here's how it goes. It says, the Gemara says, what do we hold with the following case? It's going to give another case. It says, a brisa states, if 100 figs of Maaser Rishon and 90 figs of tevel become mixed together, and again, before we were seeing in the Mishnah, it's 100 and 100 to keep it simple. Now it's asking, what happens if you have 100 of Maaser Rishon, but 90 figs of tevel? That's the new case. So it's dissimilar. And basically, the Gemara says he must remove 2/9 minus 1/10. In other words, out of these figs, there's going to be, you have to take out 91.9 figs from this mixture to make sure that there's enough for the Truma Maaser in the entire mixture. So basically, you're trying to make sure that the Truma Maaser of what you're going to be taking out is definitely, there's enough figs in there to satisfy that. You can't underdo it where whichever fig you take out, there's not enough to do for the Trumas Maaser. And again, there's a total of 190 figs in this mixture. So the Gemara says, if 100 figs of Maaser Rishon and 80 figs of tevel now got mixed together, so now there's a total of 180, he must remove out 83 minus 2/10. That comes out to 82.8 figs from this mixture. Again, what's he trying to do? He's trying to make sure that there's enough Trumas Maaser in the entire mixture. And basically when it's saying this, he's saying that you have to have a total of 82 and 8/10 figs, and 83 minus 2/10 have to be taken out, and that way you make sure that what's in the pile, that if you say, no, the Truma Maaser is going to be in that one, or the Truma Maaser is going to be in that fig,
that you can do that game, right? You have to have enough where you can play a game where you say, no, maybe it's in this fig, or maybe it's in that fig, or maybe it's in this one. And basically what you're saying is mathematically that from the main pile of 180 figs, or 190 figs, or 200 figs, that if you separated out Trumas Maaser from the remaining pile, you could get that amount. You're not ending up short. If you ended up short, that's where you end up with a problem. The Gemara says, from here on, in any case where the Maaser exceeds the tevel, the amount he must separate is determined by this calculation. So even if you have 100 Maaser and 70 tevel, the total needed for the Truma Maaser would be 10.7 figs. And you'd have 10 of Maaser Rishon, 0.7 of the tevel. And since 70 tevel can supply 7 Trumas Maaser, you have a shortfall of 3.7. He has to take out a total of 73.7 figs to make sure that there's an amount there that can satisfy the Truma Maaser. So basically what this is saying, for each 10 units by which this amount of tevel is reduced, the amount that needs to be removed from the mixture is reduced by 9.1 units. So if you have 100 Maaser and 60, he only needs to take out 64.6. And if he has 100 Maaser and 50 tevel, he only takes out 55.5. And if you have a case where there's 200 Maaser and 100 tevel, which is twice as much as 100 of Maaser and 50 of tevel, instead of being 55.5, you take out double. That's going to be 111 figs. So this, by the way, is the insight from the Chazan Ish. And this is going to finish up chapter 7, Halacha 5. We get to the last Halacha in Masechet Demai. That's going to be chapter 7, Halacha 8. And we're going to be dealing with a wine cellar where certain barrels are already designated for Maaser Rishon, but it's mixed up and we don't know which barrel got designated and what do we do to fix it. Now, I encourage you to come back to page 75 and 76 in the art scroll in chapter 7, Halacha 5, and just take a look at some of the mathematics because, again, we know now that it's easy to come back and find a third pile. Even the sages are recommending to do it, but this is trying to teach you the formulation on how to do it in case you can't get access to a third pile, and also doing it just so that you know how to do it, just for the sake of heaven, to know the halacha. And that is worth a lot. Have a great day.